Alright guys, we are starting Unit 11, which since the beginning of the year I've been telling you that there are only 12 units. Now we are on to Unit 11. We're going to start with the 1950s. So for this week, we're looking at the first day, which is what we're doing right now, review PowerPoint, review video. Then we are going to have the review guide that goes along with this video. Your discussion response for this week is on veterans benefits post-World War I as compared to post-World War II. And those are your two assignments that are due by Thursday at 11:59, your discussion response, as well as your review guide for Unit 11. So let's start from the beginning. We've got to pick up where the last presidency left off and move forward into the presidency of the time period that we're in. So we've talked a little bit about President Truman before. Truman is going to inherit the presidency after the death of FDR. He is going to have to make the difficult decision right off the jump, the decision to drop the atomic bomb. Also during his presidency, the 22nd Amendment is going to be passed. Remember, the 22nd Amendment says that the president can only serve 2 terms. 2 terms that equal out to 8 years total. Truman is going to be known for his fair deal. His fair deal is similar to some names that we've heard in the past. The New Deal, the Square Deal. So this is going to be his reform package. And what's it meant to do? It's supposed to strengthen the New Deal. Remember, he's coming in to fill the shoes of FDR. He wants to pick up where he left off. So he's going to increase the minimum wage, make sure that people are getting paid a fair wage. He is going to keep that federal assistance to farmers to make sure that we don't take a step back. He's going to grant an extension for Social Security, that agreement between generations where the elderly can retire with some kind of a retirement plan, which they earn from working in the years that they pay into it. There's also going to be an immediate implementation of anti-discrimination policies in employment. What the heck does all that mean? What it means is that you cannot discriminate who you're going to hire based on ethnicity. This is a huge step, something that we haven't seen before. So that's really the biggest deviation from the New Deal. But these other pieces up here are something that FDR had started. Truman is just carrying it on. The election of 1952. Truman is going to decide not to run for re-election. Even though he was eligible to run for another term, he's going to say, you know what, I'm done. And the reason being is his popularity was hugely declining due to the U.S. being involved in the Korean War. People didn't like being at war again. They thought that this war wasn't like other wars. We didn't need to be there. And that's going to bring down the popularity of Truman. So who do we see running? Dwight D. Eisenhower. He is going to be popular among both parties despite the fact that he is a Republican candidate. The Democrats, who had been in charge of the White House for 20 consecutive years, are going to start to see Eisenhower as somebody who's on their side because he is what we call a modern Republican. A modern Republican is going to be conservative when it comes to money. So they're going to say, you know, the government shouldn't be as involved in the economy. We should kind of step back. But they're going to be extremely liberal when it comes to issues in society. So instead of your usual Republican who says, you know, hands off government in all areas, a modern Republican is going to say hands off or be more conservative when it comes to money, and then be liberal, be more hands-on when it comes to human beings. So how was Eisenhower, or Ike as they used to call him, as president? Well, When he wins the presidency, he won mainly because he promised to end the war in Korea. He does this. He does this with what he calls atomic diplomacy. We now have atomic weaponry. We have used atomic weaponry. The world knows that we aren't afraid to use it because they saw that in Hiroshima and Nagasaki. Atomic diplomacy is the United States making it known that we will use those atomic weapons if need be to negotiate peace, and we use that in Korea. So what does that look like? That is Eisenhower going to Korea and saying, if you don't stop this fighting right now, we're going to just drop the atomic bombs over here. And you thought it was bad in Japan, it'll be even worse over here. Eisenhower is going to believe in containment, just like Truman before him. He's going to continue that policy. That policy is going to be seconded by his Secretary of State, John Foster Dulles. John Foster Dulles is going to be kind of a scary guy. He believes in what we call massive retaliation. Retaliation meaning to attack back after we've been attacked. But this massive part is what to be afraid of. He says we should use any and all weapons to protect the United States at any cost. If that means dropping an atomic bomb on all of our enemies, then so be it. The reason that's a little scary is because of this image right over here. We have atomic bombs, other countries have atomic bombs, and if we choose to use ours, they will choose to use theirs. So massive retaliation seems like a good idea until the other side is pointing their atomic weapons at you. You guys have heard of domino theory before. You heard of it last year. This is going to be that idea in the picture right over here, that if the communists or the Soviet Union goes ahead and takes control of any of these countries, that once one falls, the rest will fall. So a communist victory in one nation could lead to a chain reaction and communist takeovers in neighboring nations. This is going to be first used by President Eisenhower and his Secretary of State, John Foster Dulles. This idea originates from what happened in World War II. We saw Germany, once they got one piece, they went on to take another and another and another. Domino theory is the same idea, but instead of Germany taking all of these territories, it's just the communist Soviet Union. Eisenhower is going to have to go up against Khrushchev, who serves as prime minister in the Soviet Union from 1958 to 1964. Khrushchev is going to believe in peaceful coexistence of the two worlds of capitalism and democracy against communism and more of a dictatorship. The way that Khrushchev works is we've seen, you guys maybe remember how Khrushchev treated Hungary, who kind of pushed back against that communist rule with the bloody kind of over the top punishment for that retaliation. And you can see the UN back here kind of just backing off. So Khrushchev, while he says there should be a peaceful coexistence, he doesn't really illustrate that in practice, especially among the satellite states like Hungary. Eisenhower's massive retaliation that we were talking about is really powerless, and the Soviets begin to see how powerless that actually is, because if we used our atomic weaponry, that could be absolutely catastrophic for the entire world. Eisenhower knows it, Khrushchev knows it, and that kind of takes the wind right out of our sails. The Soviet Union is going to try to assert their dominance in the Middle East. The president at the time is not going to take well to the Soviet Union pushing into the Middle East as we grow more dependent on oil, and we want to make sure that the Soviet Union and communism doesn't spread. Eisenhower is going to make a statement in January of 1957, which becomes known as the Eisenhower Doctrine. We've heard doctrine before. We heard it with the Monroe Doctrine, we heard it with the Roosevelt Corollary to the Monroe Doctrine, and now we have the Eisenhower Doctrine. The goal of the Eisenhower Doctrine was to stop the spread of communism in the Middle East and Western Europe. And the way that we're going to do that is by using force. If there is a nation threatened by communism, the United States will step in and use force. To follow through with that promise, Eisenhower is going to create and use the Central Intelligence Agency to put down communism, or the CIA. In the early years, the CIA is going to install, which means to build, new governments in places like Iran and Guatemala. And what they do is they put in place these anti-communist rulers. And because they force these rulers, who aren't always great, on the people, we create a resentment that's going to come and bite the United States in the butt later on towards us. So the CIA, good for helping to stop the spread of communism, bad because the people don't always appreciate our meddling. So what does the post-war society look like? Now we have to remember, post-World War I, the United States crumbled. We went straight into a worldwide depression, and we hit the Great Depression. So now what does post-war society look like post-World War II? Truman is going to be faced with this transition of trying to take the United States from the wartime economy to a peacetime economy without sinking us into a Great Depression. One way we push to do this is the GI Bill. This is the most important piece of legislation that's put to work after World War II. First of all, what it does is it provides benefits for returning veterans that fought in World War II. Immediate. This isn't okay, 20 years later, come and collect on it like we did in World War I. No, this is happening right now. What it does is it provides for 1 year of unemployment payments to those who cannot find work. So just because you were a veteran, it doesn't mean that you come home and you go right back to work. Sometimes there isn't work back at home for you. So the government says, here's 1 year of unemployment while you go out to look for work. The government is also going to give financial aid to those who want to go to college after war. So they're going to pay for people to go and get the education that they would have probably gotten had they not had to go and fight in the war. Because remember, we took these guys that were 18, the prime years of their lives, right before they were about to head into college, out and put them into war. So now when they come back, we try to give them those years back. The government is also going to help provide low-interest loans to veterans to build their homes and start businesses. Again, we're trying to give them that time back, and because we can't literally give them the years back of their life that were taken, we're going to try to make it easier for them to build the life that they would have built had there not been a war. Post-World War II, the government's going to stop rationing and stop the price controls and allow business to kind of return to that fully functional without government intervention place. The baby boom. Okay, so when veterans come back from the war, they get the GI Bill. They start to feel a little bit more stable. They know they have money in the bank. They know that they're going to be able to survive, and they feel comfortable enough to start a family. Before the war, we had the Great Depression. That caused a lot of people to put off getting married, put off having kids, but now we start to see that, oh, things are turning up. The economy's doing well. We have the men back home. We can start a family now. So between 1940 and 1955, the United States is going to experience what's called the baby boom. This is a steep, and I mean steep, increase in population. When we increase population, we are also going to see production increase. People need to spend when they have a baby, when they start a family. They're buying houses, they're buying furniture, they're buying cars, they're buying clothes, they're buying more food. So we see an increased spending and an increase of production of consumer goods. Due to the baby boom, at this time, these kids are all going to grow up. As kids grow up, where do they go? They go to school. So the government has to increase spending on education because of the baby boom. We're going to see the National Defense Education Act passed, and this is going to produce, or the goal is to produce more scientists and science teachers. So education is going to be targeted towards math and science. The reason for that, right over here. When we see the Soviets start heading towards space, the United States needs to prepare to do the same thing. So we see the National Defense Education Act pushing kids in these newly built schools towards science and math to be the next scientists that are going to take us to outer space. Public universities are also going to make it easier for Americans to go to college, make it easier to get those higher degrees, that higher education, in order to make us smarter than the enemy. The suburbs are going to erupt during this time. Americans can now buy cars. They can move out of the city. You see birth rate in marriages increasing, so the demand for homes increases. People don't want to live in the cities anymore. They're noisy, they're polluted. They don't want to raise their kids there. They want a nice big lawn and a white picket fence, so they start to move out of the cities. The Veterans Administration and the Federal Housing Administration also made it easier to get a loan for your new home, which encouraged people to move out into the suburbs. Somebody who maximized this need for housing in the suburbs was William J. Levitt. He is going to build what becomes known as Levittown. Levittown is the mass production of housing. Think when you see those black and white movies, those black and white TV shows of the perfect family, how every single house looked identical and they were right next to each other. This is Levittown. We are going to take that idea of mass production to the housing, make them all fast, make a whole bunch of them, make them affordable. These are pre-cut and pre-assembled, so you can increase the number of houses being built, and we're going to do it in weeks instead of months. Now, what happens as people move out to the suburbs, the cities are going to start to deteriorate. Think about it this way. You pay taxes where you live. That tax money goes to your local government. If all of these people are moving out of the cities, then the cities are losing that tax revenue. So cities are going to start to deteriorate. Their streets, their buildings, their education system, everything that taxes pays for is going to see a decline because people left the cities. Highways. If we've got cars, we've got to have highways. Public transportation can't reach out to the suburbs. So cars are going to become very, very important for transportation. They also become a status symbol. Who's got the coolest color? Who's got the newest model? And car companies are going to thrive on that. They're going to say, okay, here's a new model. You've got to upgrade, trade in that old one, and get the newest, prettiest car. Definitely not safest. We still aren't even requiring seatbelts be installed in cars, let alone wearing a seatbelt. It's fine. The Federal Highway Act is going to be passed in 1956. $25 billion is going to be pushed for federal and interstate highways. Now, highways, yes, we think about it. It connects the suburbs to the cities. Cool. But highways are also, in the government's eyes, going to be known as the evacuation plan for the suburbs. How the heck do we get these people out of the suburbs? We've got to give them ways to get moved out. Now, if you look at some of the federal and interstate highways, they are 4 and 5 lane roads. The reason for that is because they used to be used to transfer military traffic. If there was ever a crisis, these highways were going to be used to move those big tanks and weaponry. We had to have a way to do it, and a single lane highway wasn't going to do it. So, what economic changes did we need to make during the 1950s? Well, first, let's look at the economy. Between 1945 and 1960, the average annual income per person is going to double, which is insane. That means that business also had to grow to accommodate that spending. We're going to see the eruption of a few large firms or corporations dominate during this time. This is going to be General Electric. This is going to be Ford. This is going to be General Motors. These companies are going to produce exactly what the people need during this time. We're also going to see the franchise come out, fast food services, the service marts, McDonald's, all coming out during this time period between 1945 and 1960. Up until now, most Americans were living as blue collar workers, which meant that they worked in an industry that produced a good or performed a service. They were they depended on manual labor. Well, post World War II, there are going to be new machines that are built to perform a lot of these jobs. So we're going to see a shift not only in who's in charge of the economy with these big corporations, but what kind of jobs they offer as well. The workforce is going to change. Instead of blue collar jobs, we're going to have white collar jobs. White collar jobs are what you see in this picture up here. They're going to be, here you are at a desk in a big office doing something that is stationary. You're not in a factory. So white collar jobs are going to outnumber blue collar jobs because a lot of those blue collar jobs were replaced by machines. Conditions in these white collar jobs are going to be safer than factories, but they could be boring and tedious. One of the jobs that we see that fits in a white collar job is the service sector. These are going to be healthcare providers, lawyers, retailers, bankers, insurance agents. You also are going to see the information industry start to come out. These are going to be the telephone operators that you see here. This is going to include those that built and operate the first computer, which we'll talk about in another slide. We're also going to have multinational corporations. These are going to be corporations that are not just American made and American sold. Now they're made in America but sold all over the world. So the workforce is even changing, and this is a huge shift in our workforce because we used to be factory based, hands on, and now it's really you sit at a desk, you paper push, you answer the phones. It becomes a little bit more stationary and maybe even just a little bit easier. Consumers are going to change at this time. We need to get a definition for consumerism. Consumerism is the large-scale buying of goods, and much of that buying is going to be on credit, which means you have a line of credit. You don't really have the money for it right now. You'll make payments on it later. Credit cards are going to be introduced at this time. It's mind-blowing to think about, but now we slide our card, it's all internet-based, blah, blah, blah. Back then, it was all paper. There was no internet to keep track of your account and things like that. But you're going to see a different form of credit cards on the rise at this time. And people are going to buy home appliances because they want to make housework easier. Everybody's striving for those newer, advanced models. These new advanced appliances are going to allow mom to maybe work outside the home because she doesn't have to spend all day doing laundry now. She can pop it in the washer and then pop it in the dryer, and what used to take hours upon hours is done. Vacuums, things like that. Supermarkets are going to start to appear. You've got to give the people out in the suburbs a way to grocery shop. So you see supermarkets in the suburbs making shopping again faster, easier, more convenient. The 1950s, if you were going to invent something or you were looking to buy something, you were looking to make it faster, easier, more convenient. That's what we wanted. Technology. Now, I know when I say technology, think of like your iPad, the computer that's in front of you. Think all the way back. So, developments in technology are going to help us push forward that industrial growth. Remember, the whole goal here is to save time and to save money. During this time, we see the television come out and become extremely popular. Two big points here. Everybody had a TV. This is going to become highly influential down the road, but for right now, every house in America is going to have a TV. You're going to watch it just like this family did here. The TV is going to essentially replace the radio. Where the whole family used to sit around the radio and listen to their stories, now we're watching TV. What are those shows that we're watching? Well, you're going to see like Leave It to Beaver. The idea of the perfect family is going to be reinforced by all the shows that we see on TV. The TV is also going to affect political campaigns. Now we're going to see political ads. We're going to see candidates debating each other on TV, which we'll get into more in the 60s, but it really starts in the 50s, the TV influencing people to buy certain products or vote a certain way. Computers are going to develop. Now, this picture down here is a computer during this time. They would take up an entire room, and they are not doing what you think a computer does today. But the importance here is that we see the beginning of Silicon Valley, where today you see a lot of new apps and technologies and things like that coming out of. Another technology, nuclear power. After the bomb is dropped in Hiroshima and Nagasaki, scientists realized that nuclear power can be rained in order to produce heat, generate steam, which means it could be used for electricity. So we see nuclear power plants being built. Medicine also starts to push forward. We see a vaccine for polio. We've got new surgical techniques coming out that were brought back from World War II. So the television isn't the only technology advancing at this time, although it might be argued to be the most influential. So the culture change. This is one of the more interesting pieces of the 1950s. Car culture. During the 1920s, car ownership is going to soar, but because of the Great Depression, you don't see people spending money the same way they will in the 50s. Because of the growth of the suburbs, we now see an increased dependency on cars, which means we're going to see fast food restaurants, drive-in movie theaters. Teenagers are going to have a place to escape in the car, going to these different places. You're going to see the travel industry take off because now people want to pack up the kids, get in the car, and go on vacation. And they can get there using the highway system. Walt Disney World, things like that coming out of the 50s. The Sun Belt. The Sun Belt is going to be this red area on the map down here. And it's because of the sun, the weather. So these are southern and western states that people are now going to move to because they have an attractive climate, and jobs are going to be popping up all over the place in the defense industry, which pushes people to go ahead and migrate to the Sun Belt. Family life. This is the part about the 50s that we always remember, but let's take a peek. Teens. Teenagers during this time are going to be called the silent generation. This silence is going to be perceived complacency. They aren't going to have an increased involvement in politics because they've got teenage things to do. They've got their sock hops. They aren't worried about politics. Also, during the 50s, people weren't concerned, teenagers I should say, weren't really concerned with what was happening in politics. It's not going to be until the late 60s, early 70s that we see that generation get back into politics. For right now, they're too busy at their drinking their milkshakes. They're enjoying life without many cares. It's not the Great Depression. It's not World War I. They're not being pushed to go to war. They're not being pushed to work. They're being pushed to go to school, maybe go to college. So they become known as the silent generation. Businesses, they see this, they know it. They are going to market products specifically to teenagers. Movies, magazines, they are going to reinforce what it means to be a teenager. They're going to tell them how to dress, girls in poodle skirts, boys in sweaters, going to the sock hops, going to the drive-ins, going to these diners. The nuclear family is going to be the ideal or typical family during the 50s. This is going to stick around for a while. You've got mom, dad, 2 children, and the white picket fence. That's the nuclear family. That's going to be shown in TV shows like Leave It to Beaver and Father Knows Best. This idea of mom at home taking care of the house out in the suburbs. Dad works in the city. He drives his car into the cities. They've got 2 kids that have the perfect life. That's going to be what people see on TV. That's going to be what they want to be like. Last piece for today. So conformity meant that you had the nuclear family. Not everybody likes that. Not everybody wants to be like that. There are going to be women who want to work outside of the home, but they're expected to take care of their family. There are very strict rules for what a family should look like at this time. Remember, you want to be the nuclear family. Betty Friedan is going to write The Feminine Mystique. The Feminine Mystique is going to be the book that supports the women that challenge the role of their place in society. Women are going to seek out being more than housewives. The feminine mystique is going to help them say and justify, I don't have to sit at home all day. I don't have to be depressed because I'm home with the kids, not allowed to do anything with meaning. This book is going to help those women push out of the home. 1966, we're going to see the founding of the National Organization for Women, challenging the role of women in employment, the role of women in politics, the role of women in society. So you're going to see women pushing back against that conformity. You're also going to see the Rebel Without a Cause youth movement during this time. New music, rock and roll is going to come out during the 50s into the 60s, bringing together white and black Americans to listen to the same music. Elvis Presley coming out during this time, being super controversial because of how he dressed. Oh my God, the dancing and the lyrics of his songs, pushing people to say teenagers can go out and dance. They don't have to wear those perfect little outfits and do everything that their mom and dad tells them to. Let them go to a concert. Oh my goodness, could you imagine? The beatnik generation is going to come out during this time. This is going to be a small group of writers and artists who are extremely critical of that nuclear family, that American culture that comes out during the 1950s. So you're going to see not everybody wants to be the nuclear family. In fact, some people want to live completely out of that little bubble. And that's the last piece for today. I do want to go back up to our calendar and make sure that we know due this week is your discussion response. as well as your review guide for this first part of Unit 11. As always, any questions, let me know.